I've been doing business in the Diamond District since the 80s. So I do understand the dynamic. I lived in the dynamic of the Diamond District. And, you can think about this, right? Think about you going into business. Where are you going to get your merchandise from? You can't go to a regular dealer and pay retail and expect to be a competitor. It just won't happen. So where do you go to get your wristwatches? Where do you go to get your rings? Where do you go to get your chains? Do you have someone that's going to do your repairs, your polishing? There's different levels. Your engraving. There's different levels to this whole game that you need to have access to all facets of it to stay in business. So that's why in the last video, I was saying that it's not a lot of black jewelers. And these are some of the particular things that I'm saying to you to help you understand on a broader scale on how this thing goes, So I appreciate all the comments and the advice that people tried to offer to me. But this is what happens. When you have done business numerous times with somebody before, some of the formality of a new introduction is over. We know what it is. I'm going to help you. We're going to make this thing happen, and you do what you do. But even in that, people sometimes like to jerk your chain and play games and, see if they can give you less than what you were supposed to get. And even the double back. That's a character flaw. Man, if we doing some business, you know what it is. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, there won't be a next time. There won't be a next time if there's a violation of that magnitude. We don't have to do no more business, because you can't make a good deal with a bad person. Kenny Green, raw perspective, concrete and steel, keeping it good and raw always. Unity for the community. That's how we give it up. I say that a lot of blacks don't really get into the jewelry business on a certain level because they are not sponsored. And a lot of these people that's in business are sponsored by a bigger group. And for example, a person may go into the jewelry business and someone will say, well, listen, talk to these people. And they will say, okay, we can probably do that. What do you need to get started? They may ask for where you're going to be set up at. They're going to take some of your particulars information wise and so on and wonder, what are you going to be trying to sell? Because they may be sponsoring and supplying other jewelers that may be in that same exchange where it can turn into a conflict of interest. So they ask you these questions before they set you up. Now, it's nothing for them to give you $500,000 to $1 million worth of jewelry, because what you're going to do, set up with 4 chains and 3 rings and think you're really going to go into business. And we know that if you don't have a large level of inventory to get kicked off and started with, you're not going to go nowhere, because this is a visual business and people want to see quantity and variety when they doing business. Oh, I like this one. Let me see that one. Oh, maybe I like that one. If you got 4 or 5 chains and 3 rings, you're not getting nowhere. So there are sponsors that get behind you and say, okay, we'll front you $700,000 worth of merchandise. You're going to sell chains, rings, and you can probably pick and figure out the kind of inventory that you want. And say if it's like, okay, your tab comes to $750,000. The first month, we'll let you build up. The second month, we're going to be looking for $22,000. Now, as you pay this $22,000, you can add on to your inventory, pay that, and put something on a new inventory. The goal is to keep you in business, to keep you supplied, and to keep you in a position to do business. So this is why they will give you merchandise. They will continuously supply you merchandise. You do not have to pay off the whole tab to stay in business. It's ongoing. It's ongoing. And the thing I'm saying is, in this business, in this field, a lot of blacks don't have access to sponsors. Just like in the watch game, what authorized dealer do you know that's going to supply you to have a continuous supply of Rolex, Cartier, AP watches? It's not happening. So you have to be in the trade business to try to, I bought 3 watches, I sold them, I bought 2 more, and that's a very strong buildup. And unfortunately, bias and racism and a lot of things follow in most business practices that we operate in. That's just how it is. So they're not going to allow you, when I say they, if you're in the area, they're not going to let you build yourself up to be in competition with them. And if they are the ones supplying most of the merchandise that you will be selling, you will have to pay a higher premium. That way you cannot compete, or you will not have access to certain merchandise that another jeweler will have access to. That will keep you out of competition with him in certain areas. That's just how it goes. I want to go into a little story, to help you guys understand some of the uphill battles that has happened. Like I said, I mentioned, a dude, brother that, I hustled with, did things with. And early on, I think it might have been 90 or something, he opened up a booth in the Diamond Exchange, right? And he had a small inventory. And as he tried to rely on people buying things in the street and selling them to him to build up his inventory. But also, he tried to go to some of what I mentioned before, sponsors, suppliers. And at the rate they wanted him to purchase from them, he couldn't really compete, and he couldn't even stay in business. So I say that to say, this is not one isolated incident. Sometime in business strategy and keeping you out is to keep your price to a point where you can't compete. And you only sometimes can make enough money to pay your bills with no profit, or sometimes not even that. So, brother, I watched him try to deal with different sponsors that carried a lot of inventory. And because, I'm not going to say because he was black, let's say because he was outside of the circle that business with these people are done in, he couldn't get the numbers. And when you get the numbers, you could play it on a slick for a while, you can maneuver a little bit, but it starts to change the dynamic of you staying in business. And this is what happened to brother. He couldn't stay in business. So no matter what the select few of homies that may have tried to support him, he didn't have the variety of rings, chains, and even wristwatches, because by the time he would be able to purchase something, the number and the profit wouldn't even be. So it's like, do you put out $20,000 to make $500, and that $500 have to be scattered between different merchandise? After a while, you fight to stay in business, but everything has to make sense. And in the case of brother doing business in the Diamond District, opening up his booth and not having the proper supply chains, the proper sponsors, the business didn't make sense after a while, and he went out of business. And like I said before, there's a lot of people. I know people that set up in other places. And the thing is this, a lot of cultures we will consume from, but a lot of these cultures won't consume from us. So always remember that when you opening up business or doing business,